It's a normal Saturday morning and you're walking through a busy town centre. There is nothing unusual in the crowd until you notice something stand out. It is someone in a costume you slightly recognise from a movie or TV show. Then you see another person. Are they dressed as Batman? Suddenly, there is a Darth Vader followed by an entourage of stormtroopers, a group of young adults in matching school uniforms with different coloured wigs, a couple wearing beautiful gold corsets with matching brass goggles, and they are all heading to the same venue. This is a one sure sign that a convention is happening in your town. Good evening if you're watching this along with the premiere, or if you're watching it at a later date, good evening as well, or good morning, or good afternoon, no matter where you are. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nathan, and I will be guiding you through the wonderful world of conventions. Now, you can get conventions in absolutely everything. You can get them in taxidermy, you can get them in doll collecting, you can get them even with a group of Father Christmases. But we're going to talk about conventions that the general public know them for, which is usually geek conventions. So we're talking about sci-fi, movies, gaming, TV programs, cartoons, anime, manga, cosplay, all of that good fun stuff that falls under the geek umbrella. Now, these type of conventions have definitely started becoming more popular over the last couple of years, but they are nothing new. They've been actually running for decades now, from the larger expos, where you'll have your actors and your directors come and talk about the latest release or their cult classics, to smaller conventions run by fans. And they all play a very important part in bringing people with similar interests together. But this is Trans Pride. So what has geek culture and conventions got to do with that? Well, actually, quite a lot. Going from my own experiences, I grew up quite a bit in geek culture. Both my dad and myself and my brother, we all loved computers. My brother used to play video games that I knew nothing about. My dad watched a lot of Star Trek, and I used to read a hell of a lot of comics, especially Sonic the Comic. That was definitely my favourite. As I started becoming an angsty teenager and started questioning my identity, I started getting into manga. I found them a little bit more interesting regarding gender, and also a little bit more slice of life compared to stuff that was out in the West. I mean, there was one manga that always sticks in my mind called Ram the Half, where it was about a boy who would get splashed with cold water and he would turn into a red-headed girl. I mean, there was nothing like that in the late 90s and early noughties for someone like me with that, so it was amazing having that in my life. So back in 2006 was my very first convention, which was an anime convention, and I loved it so much that I've never stopped going to conventions now. I've been to anime conventions, comic conventions, Comic-Cons, expos, gaming conventions. I've also been to a furry convention, which was a lot of fun. Over the last couple of years though, I've definitely noticed a growing visibility for the LGBTQ+ community who go to conventions. You will see young adults walking around in their full cosplays, but they're wearing rainbow flags and they're wearing trans flags and they're walking around like it's their own little mini pride. You will see merchants in the dealers hall selling LGBTQ stuff, flags, merchandise, things to celebrate your gender and identity. There will also be panels where they'll talk about LGBTQ stuff issues or gender and race diversity within popular culture. It's growing into a massive space for safety and acceptancy. So to explore this a little bit more, I called on a couple of friends to talk about their con experiences and why they think that the trans community and the geek community sometimes go hand in hand.
My involvement in trans stuff is largely through the Diversity Trust, in that I head up their trans awareness training operation. So I spend a lot of time talking to people from like the NHS and police and charities and universities and so on, and just teaching them about trans people and getting them. Longer term, one of my primary interests has been in science fiction and fantasy. You know, I started off like watching stuff like Doctor Who and Thunderbirds on the television, and reading Dan Dare and the Marvel comics when they first started doing the Avengers and X-Men.
I'm Grayson. I've been going to conventions since 2016. but I didn't come out as trans until last year. So unfortunately, the pandemic's kind of screwed over a lot of the con experience whilst being trans.
Yeah.
I'm MX Harry-Ann Bentley, she or they pronouns, either's fine. I publish comics like the ones behind me. I draw some of my own on my Instagram. I do a lot of craft stuff with my partner. She does leather crafts. I do a lot of resin stuff and clay stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's the most of it. I do too many things. Oh, and I do stand-up comedy as well sometimes, but
Fantastic.
not at the moment because everything's hard to get done at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm Liz Murphy. My pronouns are they, them. I identify as trans non-binary. I am a drapes master and costume maker for TV and film, which is basically I make costumes or I do all the fabric set dressings that you tend to see in like period dramas and stuff. And I am a LARPer.
It's always good to start at the beginning. So the first question I asked my friends was, what was your first convention?
It was one of the Bristol anime cons. None of my friends went with me. I went on my own. And then this one was local. So I think it was because I found one that was local. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. You can be yourself without having like other people's expectations. Because like, especially when I went, I didn't know anybody. So nobody knew who I was or what I was like. And I think that's the same with a lot of people, is that you can just go and you don't have anyone judging you really for like what you want to wear or how you want to act. There is that kind of community aspect, like as soon as you go, you're welcomed in, and it's just like, yeah, once you're in like a con group, you're generally like, there's always going to be someone that you can go to, and I think that's a really nice safe place to explore your identity and stuff.
Like I'd been to London MCM a couple times. I'm not sure if, I don't think it's too shady to say they're less of a convention, more of an expo. There's a lot of like actors from things you can get signatures from, and movie props you can have pictures next to. It's very much a trade show for comic artists. We don't get to talk very much at those, but it's good for money. But the first convention we went to, for me it was KissaCon. I think, oh god, it was many years ago now. God, nearly like 8 years ago. It was the first time I'd seen like people putting on panels who weren't just like, here are some celebrities, ask them questions, which is fine. Just, it was people that had been like, you may not know who I am, but here are some interesting thoughts and feelings I have on cultural appropriation or about sexuality through comics and feminism through comics and all this stuff. It's like, I don't know who you are, but I still want to see that. That's really cool.
The first conventions I actually went to were role-playing conventions, but in order to play D&D, obviously you need a group of people, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to just go off for a weekend in a hotel or holiday camp or large place. I mean, we were students, right? We slept on the floor. I mean, I had one character who was a Viking warrior who was who did quite well, but I can't remember everybody. And a lot of the time, I much preferred to play to be the GM.
Okay.
Because if I was running the game, that meant that I had to play all of the non-player characters, and nobody would look at me funny if I kept playing female characters all the time. Because there had to be female characters.
Yeah.
I lost about 10 years of my life to Dungeons and Dragons. Quite how I managed to get a degree in amongst all of that, I'm not entirely sure, but it was a lot of fun. And I am still an avid reader. I now own my own publishing company, and I go to conventions on a regular basis. In fact, going to conventions has been really a key part of my life and helped me a lot through my transition process. Through the little company where I was working, brought in a new head programmer. His name was Martin Hoare, and he was some hotshot from Oxford and whatever. But he was also very into science fiction. And he spotted the fact that I was doing all this role-playing stuff and identified me as a kindred spirit. And he, I mean, to a certain extent, he was persuading me to go to science fiction conventions. On the other hand, he was very happy to have me look after tech support and whatever over the summer when he went off to the World Science Fiction Convention, wherever it was in the world. And he could have his holiday, and I was keeping the office running, as it were. But I did go to the EasterCon, which is the British science fiction convention, the sort of main national one. It was in Brighton in 1984.
Right.
And while I was there, I ran into one of my brother's school pals, a lad called Kim Newman, who was heavily into like horror movies and stuff like that, and is now a top horror movie critic and also a very good horror writer.
Right.
And he'd just written a book with a pal of his. It's called Ghastly Beyond Belief. And it was a collection of some of the most horrible bits of script and dialogue from horror novels and movies and whatever. And the pal that he'd written this with was a young chap called Neil Gaiman. And Neil and I became friends, and we've been friends ever since. And he's done rather well with his life.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah. So that was sort of my one introduction, and it was okay. It was an interesting weekend, but it felt a little bit cliquey to me. So I didn't start going to them on a regular basis. And I was also dealing, of course, with my own problems with deciding to undergo transition and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it took me about another 11 years before I went back to another one.
Out of all of the people who I asked to speak in this video, the one person who I've known the longest is Liz, as they started going to conventions round about the same time that I did. But they've taken a turn which most con-goers usually go. You either keep on going to conventions, you stop going to conventions, or you go into LARP.
For anyone who doesn't know what LARPing is, can you explain what LARPing is?
So LARP is either live action role play or live role play. Doesn't always have to be action, because not everyone can do the action or want to do the action. So we tend to lean more to live role play now, to make it a lot more accessible for people. And it's basically, imagine Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role play where you make up a character fitting within the system, but you do it in real life, in a field usually, or in a building.
And how many of these events usually run throughout the year?
Oh, so many. So you've got like your big fest LARPs, which tend to be a couple thousand people. And they will usually run 3 to 4 times a year. So the one I usually go to is Empire. And that runs 4 events a year through the summer, well, technically spring, but we all know it's winter. Summer, autumn, and then our last one's in September. So we all don't freeze in a field between September and April. And then you have kind of like player events that will offshoot from different games that are run by the players rather than the organizers of the events. You can get so many of those, you're never going to be able to go to all of them. And then you have like one-shots that you can go to throughout the year, smaller player events, smaller games that are run by like local communities and stuff. So a lot of universities will have LARPs that they run. And yeah, it's basically all over the country. Wherever you live, you'll probably be able to find a LARP. Going to conventions once you've been to a load it's a social thing. You go to see your mates. Or like you go to compete, like I was doing as well. I kind of got to the point where I wanted to do something new. I was able to see everyone outside of conventions as well, because I think once you get to kind of like your mid-20s where you've probably got a car or you can afford transport whenever you want, like you're not limited by seeing your friends just at conventions, and so you can spread out. And then one of my friends introduced me to Empire and was like, come along, you can make really amazing costumes. Like, it can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be a set character that you're then replicating. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. I played Dagon, who's part of the Shattered Tower in the Highguard Nation. They're kind of like, imagine kind of like the Crusaders kind of style of costume. So armor, tabards, very military background, but also highly religious as well. I am a Naga, which is a snake person, someone touched by the Night Realm. Dagon is a male, he, him pronouns. And he has very cute fangs and feathers and scales all over his face. And he is a cheeky bastard. Being able to go to LARP and make your own character, I think, gives you a lot more freedom than cosplay does, because I did male characters at conventions, but that's kind of more playing a character who's already established.
Yeah.
And it's not all about role play. Whereas at LARP, you can be you but a different gender, basically. And it's really nice to be able to explore, like, this is how I would look if I was a different gender or presented myself differently. This is how people would use pronouns for me differently. And yeah, it was very much a big deal in terms of realizing, like, where I was on the gender spectrum.
So now that we've spoken about people's cons experiences, I wanted to get a little bit deeper and find out why they think that trans and non-binary people find an appeal within geeky conventions.
One of the reasons for that, certainly in the past, has been that science fiction people were used to being outcasts. But, you know, back when I was a kid, reading science fiction was for children. And when you became an adult, you were supposed to put away things like that. And therefore, the people that go to conventions, and the science fiction convention was started because there were these nerds reading magazines in America who didn't know anybody else who liked this sort of stuff, but they wrote letters to the magazine and said, am I the only person in Philadelphia who reads this? And the next month the letter would come in saying, no, I live in Philadelphia, let's meet up for a coffee. And so that's how the whole thing grew. But it was very much a group of people who felt that they were outsiders, that they were looked down upon by the rest of the world. And for people like that, it's easier to be accepting of other people who get looked down upon.
Actually, where I've met the most trans people has been at the cons. I don't know if that's just a Bristol thing, because Bristol's one of those places where literally everyone goes to cons.
I'm thinking that there's quite a big trans and non-binary community within the LARPing community.
Like, I found more so than when we were at conventions.
Right.
Like, it's weird because, like, it's been a couple years since I've been to a con properly. So, like, I know obviously it's more like opinions have developed and stuff over the years. And so it's probably partially more like people are more comfortable coming out in areas now. Whereas back when I was going to cons, like, it wasn't a thing many people knew about. So, like, I'm seeing more of the openness now in LARP, whereas I would imagine there's a lot more openness in cons compared to when I was going.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, LARP to me is just way more, like, I want to say open-minded to everything. Like, I never knew about being poly at conventions and stuff until I started going to LARP. By the time I left, like, being non-binary wasn't, like, I want to say mainstream thing.
Yeah, it wasn't very visible, was it?
Yeah.
It was definitely something that was there. There was definitely sort of, in a way, that androgyny and and that playing with genders.
But you never saw it as, like, if you were trans, you were either leaning to one of the two binaries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
especially as there have been less positive representation in a lot of mainstream comics, it's been an opportunity for people to describe their own experiences and their own identities through indie comics and be like, you know what, if they're not going to do, intersex people of color in here, I should do this. And then someone makes a great comic about being intersex person of color. And you get to find these voices at conventions where everyone's on more of a level playing field of just, we all have the same table size. We're all doing our best. We all turned up and we all just put our stuff on the table and it's like, here, look, if it's of interest, please talk to me. Let's hang out. I can tell you about this work pretty well because it's based on my life, or based on characters are based on my life, or, because there's different levels of fictionalness that still have representation, but there's also a lot of very good auto-bio stuff. Thought Bubble is my favorite convention to go to in the UK. It is 2 to 3 days of comic convention, but also a full week of the Leeds Comic Art Festival. And it's just big. And you get to have some guests from overseas, but they're mostly kind of like, I don't know how indie I can say, but, people like Noelle Stevenson and Harker Vagrant, Kate Beaton. There we go.
Yeah.
I was like going through my Kates. It's a lot of them. Kate Bishop? No, fictional. But also a whole lot of locals and a whole lot of really starting out indie folks. They're very good at presenting people, encouraging people to put on their own panels with very decent attendances as well, because they get these brilliant buildings like the Royal Armouries Museum and putting up their own things in town, and now they're over in Sheffield. Well, last year they were. We'll see what happens next year. Fingers crossed. But it's just a great melting pot of so many different comic levels of experience and ideas and representation. If there's a comic if you're interested in comics, then there'll be a comic about the thing you're interested in there somewhere, because there's just so many people in this small space. They make as much space as they can, to be honest, though, so that's pretty great. It's a great cultural melting pot. It's like Europe, the comic convention. It's great. I love it so much.
The other thing is, of course, that changing sex is not usual in a science fiction or fantasy setting. I mean, some of the earliest examples we have of stories of people changing sex are in Greek mythology. Right? And the whole medical process of gender reassignment is a very science fictional concept. Science fiction writers love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, this is something which is interesting and weird and seems impossible, but let's suppose you could do it. So people have been writing science fiction stories about sex changes for decades now, long before many of them even knew that trans people existed, I think.
The system is really nicely set up that your character themselves can transition with herbs that are in the game. So you can have this herb that will act as hormones for you, so your character can transition as you do.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. And it's such a great way to explore safely. If you're curious about gender and stuff and you want to explore it, and you are like into LARP or the cosplay scene, like it's such a great way to try it out without the fear of having to do it in real life. And it's so nice to be able to do that in a friend group where the majority of people will support you and help you, like with exploring transitioning and stuff.
There are lots and lots of science fiction people who are trans, non-binary, whatever. There are loads of writers these days. I have a Twitter list which is made up entirely of trans writers who've got published fiction.
So now you're probably thinking to yourself that you'd like to actually attend a con, and I wouldn't blame you. They're a lot of fun. But if you're a little bit nervous about what to expect, I've asked my friends for a little bit of advice.
The best thing to do is to start looking around social media for people who are already part of the trans community and see if they're going to conventions, find out which ones they go to, and then you've got an automatic friend circle. And also, of course, there's lots of, there's the whole wider LGBT plus, feminist community, all these people who are very supportive of us.
Well, the great thing about cons is that because the amount of cosplay going on, you can wear basically anything and no one will bat an eye at it. They're either being too distracted by someone cosplaying as Cthulhu with stilts on the other side of the hall, or they're too busy doing their own thing. Like, even less so than usual are people paying attention to specifically you. Unless you're cosplaying something obscure and someone recognizes it, at which point you've already got something in common, so that's great. That's a great starter. Cosplay is actually a great way to meet people because you know you have something in common, because you're wearing it on yourself as an advertisement as to why you're a cool person and why you've got similar interests. But besides that as well, like, going to a con, especially if it's out of town, there's a lot of people, like majority people, you won't know and won't know you, and you may not see again without actively seeing them again. So it's a great opportunity to wear what you want, express yourself how you feel, be as gay or as ace or as, subtly those things as well as you would like. And you'll definitely find people who are on a similar level. And it's just a great opportunity to just express yourself how you want to,
I think, especially for someone like me, I have anxiety a lot anyway. So going to a con by myself was terrifying. Try and have someone go with you. If you can't, then you can always text someone on the way there to keep your nerves down, and you don't have to do any of the big things. You don't have to go to the panels if you don't want to be with the people. Like, generally, if you just want to go and see what it's like, then you can just go and see what it's like. But there will always normally be someone there that you end up talking to. Don't be afraid of not fitting in is like the main thing, because like we've all not fit in at some point. And like, especially if it's someone with anxiety, it's like once you get over the hurdle of going to the con, you're probably going to have a great time.
If you want like just a nice little sampler that you can go to for a day and walk away from if it's not really your thing, I would say look for something local. Check out university. There's usually very small local groups. A lot of them would do weapons practice and stuff. So it doesn't even have to be in character. If you just want to try out the fighting or something like that, or what it's like to wear armor, you can go and try that for the day. People are very, very welcoming and very happy to lend kit, I found. Like, talk to people online, go on Facebook. There's pretty much Facebook groups for every LARP out there, where you can meet people, meet local people. If you want to go like feet first in the deep end, look at a fest LARP. It tends to be a long weekend event. You will likely need a tent and warm weather gear and something if you get utterly soaked. But basically from that, you just need basic kit and you can rock up. You can buy a lot of stuff on site, which is excellent. There's so many traders at every event I've been to that you can literally rock up with no LARP gear whatsoever. If you wanted to kind of experience what it is but don't want to play, you can sometimes volunteer to Monster. There are people that will specifically go just to Monster, and that is basically whenever they send people out for fights, you are who they are hitting.
Right.
And yeah, they will give you crew tickets, so like your meals are covered. And then in the evenings you can have an R&R character where like you can play with everyone else in the non-battle area.
I mean, the point of a convention is that it has to be a communal space. You can't have people who are going there to be nasty to other people.
Yeah,
that would destroy the atmosphere. And so conventions have to have rules, and it's not just us they protect. They're protecting the people of color. They're protecting the disabled people.
I mean, I love the work that the Take This Foundation do over in America with I'm not sure if you're aware of this, a project started by Susan Arendt and Russ Pitts, who used to be the Escapist magazine.
Okay.
Both really cool games journalists and just awesome people. Excellent photos of dogs all over their Twitters. And Take This is people with experience of conventions and experience of dealing with people with neurodiversity or issues with anxiety or like being overwhelmed, coordinating lounges where people can chill and trying to get people more informed about getting people to these lounges if they need a break. And basically, yeah, anytime I know someone who's looking at starting a convention, because here in the North, we went through a period of everyone and their uncle tried one. And I loved it so much because we got to get all these mini ones rather than one big one. And I would always recommend like message Take This and see what they suggest, because they have specifically out there to try and decrease the number of people having a difficult time at these events and make it a lot easier to just go out and enjoy yourself, because sometimes you just need a little break for whatever reason, just a little break, a bit of water, and to remember to take care of yourself. So important.
What was your very first cosplay that you did?
Harlequin. It was a version of the Arkham City Harlequin. So I've done Hades a few times. Ursula, that was like 15 meters of netting under that skirt. And Spike from Buffy, because I think that's definitely like the most recent one, because that was also the only one I've done since I've come out. And it was the first time I'd worn a proper binder to a con. And I just felt so good in that cosplay, because I had the hair, I had the outfit, I even managed to do contouring, and like it was just great, and people recognized who I was, which I wasn't sure they were gonna, because Buffy's kind of old now for a lot of the people that go to the Bristol cons.
Have you ever cosplayed?
Of course.
Yes. Oh wow. So for the release, and this is aged badly, for the release of Harry Potter 5, Order of the Phoenix, I went to an Ottakar's, which was then bought by Waterstones later. So all of this is like in the deep past, wearing a maroon jumper with an R stitched on it and sprayed orange hair. So I cosplayed as Ron Weasley to a book launch, and I didn't know it was cosplay at the time. Obviously, I was just dressed up as Ron Weasley, but it's the same difference. And now, years later, of course, I'm making my own works, and way too trans for someone to appreciate that properly. Perhaps made those characters.
When I lived in Australia, a couple of friends of mine, Wendy and Chris, were big into costuming, and they started something called the Australian Costumes Ball. And I helped them put that on, and it was a big success. So obviously I needed a costume for that. And I had, I'd been a member of a reenactment group in the UK. And there's a group called the Far Isles, if everybody's heard of it. So I had from that a medieval outfit, and I went and rented a very long red wig to go with it.
One of the things with cosplaying is that you can tell someone is having fun as their character, and it really does make a difference. And like Spike was the closest to me that I've been in a cosplay.
It happens a lot, like in costume groups or one-on-one, people will be like, I want to present this, but I don't know how to do it because my body is this. And so it's stuff like corsets, padding, different cuts will make you look so different. And it's just like, it's looking at what you want to be and making it fit your body as it is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're not going to get off the rack, like, tailored suits that fit. I wish I could wear a Ted Baker suit, but that ain't going to happen. So it's just like, it's looking at the style of cut that is made in and making it work on your body.
Yeah.
And it's become like quite a common thing that gets asked of, how can I do this? And it's easier than people think. There's so many makers in the LARP community as well. Like, if you can't do it yourself, there will be someone who will like help you, or you can commission them and have something really nicely made that is going to give you the look that you want.
So you've been to a couple of conventions now, and you're wondering, how can I get involved more with this community? Well, there's lots of ways you can get involved. You can enter the competition if there's any competitions running at that convention. You can submit to run a panel, or you can submit to organise a meetup, so you can meet up with people with similar interests. You can, if you're a seller of anything, you can sell to other people with similar interests in the merchants or dealers rooms. You can help out behind the scene, because conventions are a lot of work. Or you could even run your own convention. I give you full speed for that. They're very hard work, but I'm pretty sure the majority of people who have run them have found them worthwhile. So I've asked my friends if they've been anything more than a participant at a convention, and Harry told me about her distribution company for comics, and Cheryl told me about BristolCon.
So Dragonhide Studios is me and my partner Gwen, and we started out because our friend Cami, who's from Germany, was looking to publish an anthology of their short variations on a theme comic, Get Your Man, which, if I can point, is that one there. I had a web shop because it was stuff that we didn't sell at conventions, like just some crafts and stuff that people could get outside of convention time. And then we put Cami on there. And then our friend Paul Savage, the comedian, was selling his comic on Amazon, and they took a very large percentage. And we were like, well, that sounds excessive. Do you want to just drop a bunch off with us, and we'll put it on our website as well? And then we did that. And then it just kind of kept growing into, oh, well, if you don't have a web shop, we can put it on our web shop. I don't know, keep it chill. And then we met Anfalo, who's from Venezuela, who... this is the first time I've been in a video call with someone, and art that I remember printing is on the wall behind them, which is so exciting to me. Has not happened yet. I'm like, oh my God.
So I got these at, I think it was Kitacon. I got these prints.
Yes, it was the Kitacon was the first time we released Anfalo stuff. Got a whole bunch of prints just to see which ones would go. And we were in the process of making that book at the time. And yeah, the reaction was really great. People really liked the big, beefy pinups.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And so, yeah, we funded that one ourselves because I was just in a pretty decent job at the time. And so we were able to split it with Anflo 50-50 after that point. And so we still get to send him money now and again. And yeah, then there's HP Laconin on the end. Rami, a friend of ours who is from Finland, who has started publishing their own stuff. Well, they've been doing zines for years, but they were like, hey, I want to make a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm going to be in Leeds at some point. Do you want to like make a whole bunch of stuff, and then you can have half of it, and I'll take the rest of it home, and then we'll just sell it in our respective countries? So it's just kind of very naturally progressed outwards. And over time, it's become this thing of like, well, we really like queer comics, so should just see how many queer comics we can help people get made. Well, I'm actually doing an anthology at the moment with my friend Tab Kimpton, Nectar, which is a erotica anthology about trans femme and non-binary romances and erotica. So the thing that I see from people who are new to conventions every single time is they underprice everything, they don't talk themselves up enough, and they seem to act like they've come to the wrong place because everyone here is like levels above. And it's just that it's just being new. If you drew a thing, you've made a thing. Doesn't matter what other people's art styles or art levels are like. You took the effort and made a thing happen. And then you got it printed or quilted or, published or made it into badges or whatnot. Like, there are people at a convention who won't have done that are just looking around at stuff. So for starters, don't think that your stuff is nothing because other people could have done it, because they haven't. You went and did the thing. A lot of people will never do the thing. And if people are interested in your work, tell you why it's interesting to you. Tell them why you enjoyed making it, rather than just saying like, it's a comic about me and my feelings and my thoughts, which, guilty. I've absolutely done that for a long time. Just be like, yeah, I wanted to have a conversation with myself through drawings about my own queerness and try to be more open about it. And this is that.
So BristolCon is the local convention that we have in Bristol. It's an annual event, and it's a very particular type of event. I mean, a lot of conventions are big weekend, people stay in the hotel all weekend. With BristolCon, when we started it, and credit for starting it has to go to the late Colin Harvey, who was a very good local writer. And it was his idea that we should, instead of just meeting in the pub, we should actually have a little convention. But when we came to do it, the people involved didn't want to get involved with something that was going to be a huge amount of work every year. They wanted something small and focused. So we made a deliberate policy decision to say it's just going to be one day, right? So nobody actually needs to stay in hotels. That'll make it nice and cheap. People can just come in, and Bristol is fabulously well connected. As a result of that, it's possible to do a one-day convention that doesn't just rely on the local audience. We got a very good relationship with the Doubletree Hotel in Bristol, which is always delighted to have us, and keen to have us back when we can go and stay in hotels again. And it's just, it took about 3 years, I think, to grow to the capacity of a hotel.
I'd love to have a stall, but I don't really have enough stuff to sell to have a stall like that. But if there happened to be a con where they needed someone to be part of a LGBTQ plus stall, I would love to do that. Just be around for other queer people that need help, and or people who need signposting to other things. That would be really cool.
When we went to KitaCon, when we were crew that time, I got to judge the cosplay contest with Volpin Props and Bill Winans for the weekend. They were absolutely fantastic. They were so much fun to hang out with. And we just chilled out. And being crew, you always see it as absolutely mad and mental, and it really was. But then at the same time, it's so much fun. And just you're hanging out and you're making an event good for other people as well, which is really nice.
I guess one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk about this subject was because we haven't been able to have big social events like conventions this year. I wanted to ask my friends how they felt. It was interesting to get a mixed response about it all. Obviously the sadness, but then also the excitement about what virtual conventions can bring.
Oh God, yes. I day job a lot. This is expensive to do, and the only way you can really do comic publishing is either you commit to it heavily, and that becomes your income and outcome as the majority thing. For me, it's always been the security of a day job, because I've tried being self-employed. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I would always look forward to booking off a week, being able to get to the place early, stay with friends if I can, go and enjoy the con, go around quickly and see all the people I haven't seen throughout the rest of the year. One time I challenged myself to make gingerbread cookies of people's characters, and I was like, this is the list of people I must see. So this helps me remember, and just check in and see how people are, and just chat to people I don't see enough throughout the rest of the year, and then go back to the day job. But with this, I work at a retail place that also does delivery, so I have been working through all of the different lockdown phases non-stop, and just kind of been there I wish there was a thing to look forward to. Yeah. This just doesn't seem to end.
I do miss it in a sense, but it's not been too bad for me, because I was not sure how to cosplay anything else, because it's my cosplays have almost been a 50-50 split male-female characters, but now especially with dysphoria, I feel a lot like I can't cosplay female characters, so having a year off has actually been quite nice. So so there's not that anxiety of who do I cosplay? Can I cosplay this? Am I going to get misgendered if I cosplay this character and things like that? Because it's the best thing about anxiety and dysphoria meeting is that it's just, you've got that side of it of whether you feel comfortable in cosplay, and then you've got the added anxiety of how other people perceive you. And like normally in cosplay it doesn't matter because it's cosplay, you're the character, but like it's been nice not having to think about all of those kind of intrusive thoughts for a year. It's just been a year off and I can reminisce. So hopefully next year I'd be able to do something else, but it's just been nice not having to kind of think plan too much with all the transition and dysphoria and stuff this year. It's been nice just to be working on me, not also having to work on my cosplays.
Yeah.
we managed to get our player event
right
the week before we went into lockdown.
Oh, so back in February then?
Back in March.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
Yeah, it was literally, we did the Saturday and Sunday, and I think by the Thursday we were in lockdown. I'm really glad we got that one event.
Yeah.
It was I actually managed to see both of my partners one last time before we went into lockdown. And so it was I got to have a really nice time with them. It's we got a first date and everything, and then I didn't see either of them for 2 months.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Everybody has been scrambling like crazy to learn how to do online events. And we're starting to get reasonably good at it now, although it would be better if the software were better. But as a result of that, not only has every convention around the world that needed to happened online, but also a whole bunch of new conventions have sprung up because people are saying, hey, it's online. We can do it cheaply and easily, and we can bring in people from all over the world. So a couple of great new conventions that I'm really pleased about. One is called FutureCon, which was started by a bunch of people in Brazil, believe it or not, right? And with the help of a mate of mine who lives in Rome. And they brought in people from something like 28 different countries to be speakers at that event. I was honoured to represent Wales at that. It was cool. So that was really good. And they're now looking to make that an annual event. So this is a convention not run by Americans or British, but run largely by people from the global south. And there's another convention called FireCon, and that's FIYAH. Probably guessed from that it's run primarily by African Americans.
Yeah.
But they also expanded it to bring in people of colour from all over the globe. And there's a lot of Asian folks involved in it. So, for example, people from Japan and Singapore and so on. And that's also been hugely successful. So, I went along just to see what happened, and it was just so delightful seeing all of these Black science fiction fans and Asian science fiction fans saying, yes, a space for us at last, a convention we can go to where it's not 90% white. I obviously miss my friends who are involved with BristolCon. But at the same time, the weekend that it was on, I actually spent virtually in Salt Lake City at the World Fantasy Convention. I did 3 panels there.
When pandemic is over, we're just all going to meet up in con stuff and just cosplay and drink, and it'll be great.
Lastly, I wanted to ask my friends about their happiest moments that they've had at conventions, or in Liz's case, LARPing.
Winning 4 Hugos. That has to be pretty good.
Yeah.
This is a Hugo Award, and as you can see, it's one of these award type things with a big hunk of metal and whatever. It is given out by the World Science Fiction Convention at the Worldcon every year, and the members of the convention vote on it in a number of categories. So in some ways, it's like the Oscars.
Well, I won Cosplay Masquerade for when I was Ursula And that was really cool because it also meant I won the prize, which meant I had more money for booze. So that was great. Every year I'd gone to the masquerade and I hadn't won it. And it was just like, I had gotten to a point where it's like, what's the point of doing all of this if I'm not going to win? And then I won. I didn't even want to enter it that time because I didn't think I was going to win it. It's like, okay, that's cool because I did put a lot of effort in, and then I won it. And I was like, actually, yeah, no, I don't do it to win because I was happy not doing it. The fact that I actually have been so many times and like people are recognizing me, and that was really cool.
So there's a convention in Barcelona that's stopped now, unfortunately, called Kaboom, and love it to pieces, run by some friends of mine. They invited me over a few times to coordinate some panels there as a queer person. And I coordinated a panel on, I was on a panel about feminism through the years, through comics and the evolution of the feminine archetype. Did one on queer representation, erotica versus porn in comics, which Stjepan Sejic, who does Sunstone, was there. I was like, oh my god, this is a very big person who makes amazing stuff. All of those were fantastic. It's also that they had their own food. They were making food at the convention, and they would bring menus around to the tablers to tick off what stuff they would like, gave them a discount because they were there at the convention, and just said, okay, if you give us the menus back, we'll bring it round to your table at this time. And then you can eat at the table and you don't have to worry about going and finding a Subway or whatever. And it was amazing. Not just because the food was fantastic, but also because it's like, oh my god, I don't have to worry about these things. I just have to focus on myself, having water, and going to the toilet when I need it. And I don't have to worry about, I'm in an unknown city. Where is food? What is food? I have met a lot of friends that I still have now through conventions. Actually, the other great memory of mine was at the last Thought Bubble, where I met HP Laconin and Cami was staying at our place, and they got to bring their own comics. I'm so excited for them. And I just went to a bunch of queer comics folks that I liked the work of or knew a little through conventions. I was like, hey, it's Leeds. I know this place. Do you want to go to this pizza place afterwards that does vegan stuff? And it got about a dozen people to go to my favorite pizza place in town. And we all just took up this giant tabley area. And I was like, years ago, I would have wanted someone to do this for me. So I love the idea of just going around to all the queer folks and being like, hey, I know we're all tired and probably going to leave to our own countries and not see each other for a long time. Do you like margarita?
You've been in a battle, everyone's in the rear guard, you see all your friends going down around you, you're bleeding out, you're crying for help, and then one of the players, who is now my girlfriend, pretended to be dead, and she was slowly healing everyone and crawling around on the ground. And we finally got back, and we were like trudging through behind enemy lines, and we finally made it back just in time for people to save us. It was so good. It's silly stuff. Like, one night we found a cocktail bar up in the league, and it was just the blue drink was perfect, and we bought out all of their pitchers for the night. We went and played blackjack, we won big, we made the dealer cry. It was so good.
1995, when I was starting out on the transition process, I'd moved to Australia, as one does, because the advice back at the time was to get as far away from your old life as possible.
Right.
Right, I'll go and live in Australia. Now, I had the opportunity to go and work in Australia, so I took it. But because I was like working for a subsidiary of the UK company I'd started with, there was a certain amount of back and forth. And I was back in England in the summer of 1995, and the World Science Fiction Convention was in Glasgow. Now, I was working for a different company this time, but I knew that Martin was going to be there, and some friends of his that I'd met. I expected that Kim and Neil would be there, and also a dear friend of mine, Annabelle, who I first met at the support group in London for transvestites and transsexuals, as they called it back then.
Yeah.
So Annabelle was going to be there, and some of her friends. I she had a whole group of people that she did role playing with. So I knew them. So there were people I would know. But it was a world convention, and I was crossing my fingers that there would be people there from Australia, because I didn't know anyone in Melbourne except my colleagues at work. I had 0 friends. And I figured perhaps if there are some science fiction fans from Melbourne, that I could make some friends outside work. And I was still having to present as male at work because I hadn't got far enough along on the transition to go full time. But I figured I could meet some Australians and they would only know me as me, and that would be a good start on the process. So I went along to this thing, and it was pretty much like the one I'd gone to Brighton, but bigger and with people from all over the world, and the usual big name writers and whatever. But it turned out that there were a whole bunch of people there from Melbourne, because Melbourne was like Science Fiction Central in Australia. They'd run several World Cons before. They were bidding to hold another one in 4 years' time, and they were absolutely delighted to have me along, because he was somebody that could help them with doing their convention, which was great. Martin introduced me to them all, and suddenly I had this whole group of friends in Melbourne. But because, you have to explain how Worldcon works. Worldcon it's kind of like the Olympics in that it goes to a different city every year.
Right.
The Olympics is every 4 years. Worldcon is every year. But in order to get the right to hold it, you have to go through a bidding process. Now, in the Olympics, it's basically that the International Olympic Committee comes and visits your city and you bribe them and try and get them to vote for you. But with Worldcon, it's voted on by the people who are attending a previous convention. So at the moment, it's on a 2-year cycle. And so this year, they were voting for who's going to have it in 2022. So this year it was in Wellington, New Zealand, and they voted in 2022 it will be held in Chicago. So the people from Melbourne needed my help to persuade people to vote for them. And in order to understand all that, I had to understand how the voting system worked. So they sent me off to do voting, and Martin told me to go and vote for this particular bid for Boston because his friends were involved in it. And I go along and I stare at this voting paper and think, oh, right, it's a single transferable vote thing. I'm familiar with this from student politics, so I know how to do preferences. And I was just about to do it, and this guy behind the desk says, "Can I help you?" I presume that I didn't understand the ballot paper and he was going to mansplain it for me. I let him talk to me, and we seemed to get on reasonably well. And I told him that the Australians were having a party that night and he should come along to it. And he said, "Yeah, sure, see you there." They put me on the door to welcome people. That was my first job, as it were, as part of the Melbourne bid. So everybody who came, I had to give them a sticker for their convention badge and welcome them to this little bit of Australia. And this guy from the voting desk came up, he was an American, and he started talking, and we chatted along, and basically that was it for the evening. And he asked me out the next night.
Oh.
And we're still together 25 years later.
Oh. That's a wonderful story.
So, I'm all in favour of conventions.
Oh, that is such a lovely story to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
I wanted to say a big thank you to Cheryl, Harry, Liz and Grayson for taking the time out to have a little chat with me. And also a big thank you for you for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed. There's lots of other stuff going on this week. There are drinking draws, there are improvs, there are poetry nights, and there is obviously the big market day that is happening on the Saturday. Until then, I hopefully will see you at a convention sometime. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Were you during that time of the Satanic Panic and everything when that all sort of came about?
I don't think I've actually got anything written which has denounced me as an agent of Satan. But...
fan-run events, and they all play a similar role in bringing people. But actually, conventions have been running for decades now, much longer than I've been alive, and I'm old.
Who else do I like that's topless other than Khal Drogo?